Before we jump into this crazy story, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Maybe you're kicking back in a sunny beach house in Florida, stuck in rush hour traffic in Los Angeles, or relaxing in a cozy mountain cabin in Colorado. I love seeing how far these Karen stories of drama and karma can reach across the world. The air inside the plane was thick with recycled oxygen and the faint scent of coffee from the galley. Conversations hummed like static, a background noise that made the sudden burst of shouting slice through the cabin like a blade. A woman's voice, sharp, commanding, and already laced with anger, rose above the quiet chatter. Every passenger within 3 rows turned their heads toward the aisle. She stood there, solid and immovable, like a wall no one wanted to deal with. Around 40, with a heavy build and her brown hair twisted into a bun that seemed ready to snap, she was impossible to ignore. Her bright yellow dress glared under the cabin lights, the neckline low and loud, demanding attention just as forcefully as her voice. She jabbed her finger toward the man seated by the window, her words vibrating with fury. "That's my seat. Move." The man she was pointing at didn't flinch. He was 38, casually dressed in a gray hoodie and jeans, the kind of person who blended easily into the background. He wasn't here for a fight. He was here to endure a flight, maybe catch a nap before the wheels touched down hours later. But his eyes narrowed, calm and unshaken, as he looked at her. "No," he said, his voice steady. "This is my seat. Check your ticket." The flight attendant nearby already had, holding the boarding pass that betrayed the truth. The window seat belonged to him. Hers was the aisle, 1 row up. Yet she refused to move, refusing to accept reality even as proof stared her in the face. "You don't understand," she snapped, her words cracking like a whip. "I need the window. I can't sit anywhere else." Her tone carried the expectation that rules were meant for others, never for her. It wasn't just a request, it was a demand, the kind that brooked no refusal. And it set the tone for everyone watching. The quiet in the cabin deepened, the murmurs silenced. All eyes were on the standoff. He adjusted in his seat, resting an elbow on the armrest. His expression stayed unreadable, but beneath it he felt the heat rising. He had boarded early, chosen the window on purpose, and prepared himself for hours of solitude with music and maybe a book. That peace was unraveling. She stepped closer, her body blocking the aisle, her finger still leveled like a weapon. Passengers craned their necks to watch. One man pulled out his phone, angling it discreetly, though the glow of the screen betrayed him. Another whispered to his seatmate, shaking his head. The tension was growing like pressure in a sealed cabin, impossible to ignore. The flight attendant repeated herself patiently, trying to guide the woman to her actual seat. But she twisted her face into a mask of disbelief, refusing to accept what was plain. "This is unbelievable. You're really going to let him sit there when I'm the one who needs it? Do you know how hard it is for me to fly? I have issues. Real ones. I need that view to stay calm." It was theater, but a bad kind. The kind meant to guilt strangers into submission. Her voice carried, rising high enough to make heads turn from several rows back. She wanted an audience, needed the crowd to see her as the victim. The man by the window let her finish. He didn't interrupt, didn't rise to her bait. His silence forced her words to hang in the air, heavy and obvious. He was no stranger to confrontation, but this wasn't just about him anymore. Every word she spoke bounced off the cabin walls, landing in the ears of 30 silent witnesses. Finally, he leaned forward slightly, his voice low but cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "You booked an aisle seat. That's what's printed on your ticket. This one is mine." His refusal was calm, not dramatic, but the finality in his tone made her eyes flash. Her hand trembled where it hovered midair, her painted nails glinting under the lights. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came. For a heartbeat, she faltered. Then she shifted tactics. Her voice broke into a higher pitch, almost a whine. "You don't get it. I can't sit there. I'll panic. I'll have an attack. Do you really want that on your conscience?" A ripple passed through the cabin. A mother 2 rows ahead pulled her child closer, whispering something in her ear. An older man shook his head slowly. The phones were no longer subtle. 3 passengers now held theirs up without shame, recording the unfolding drama. The red light on one device blinked steadily, capturing everything. The man in the gray hoodie turned his head, meeting the gaze of the closest passenger holding a phone. Then he looked back at the woman. His lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile, not cruel, but certain. "You're free to panic," he said quietly. "Just not in my seat." The words landed like a slap, not loud, but impossible to ignore. She gasped, her face flushing with a shade that clashed against her yellow dress. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her breath audible even over the hum of the engines. The flight attendant intervened again, firmer this time. "Ma'am, you need to take your assigned seat. We can't continue boarding until you do." But she stayed rooted, as if the carpet beneath her feet had become quicksand. Her eyes darted around, searching for allies, for anyone, to support her claim. But the faces turned away, indifferent. A few watched openly, curiosity in their eyes, but none offered help. The silence pressed harder than words. She was alone. Her finger dropped slowly, her hand falling to her side. For the first time, doubt flickered across her expression. Still, she didn't move. She couldn't, not yet. To retreat now would mean defeat, and she wasn't ready to give up her performance. The man in the window seat leaned back, resting his head against the cushion, his gaze sliding toward the glass where sunlight streamed through. He acted as though she no longer existed, as if her noise was nothing more than turbulence in the background. But inside, his pulse ticked faster. This wasn't over. He knew it. The way her jaw tightened, the way her breath came hard and shallow. She wasn't done. She was recalculating, preparing her next move. And he was ready. The passengers shifted, restless. Some whispered, others stared openly, waiting for the explosion they sensed was coming. The air felt thinner, the cabin tighter, as though the walls themselves were leaning in, pressing them together. Her lips parted, but no words came yet. She inhaled, slow and deliberate, filling her lungs like a diver before plunging into deep waters. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The man turned his head slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. Calm, steady, unblinking. It was a silent promise that whatever storm she was about to unleash, he wasn't moving. Not an inch. The plane had yet to leave the ground, but the battle for the seat had already taken flight. And it was only beginning. Before we move on, I've got to mention one of my absolute best stories. It's about a screaming Karen who demanded my business partner's first-class seat and instantly regretted it. That one's wild from start to finish, and I've linked it in the description and end screen. Stick around after this story to check it out. You won't want to miss it. The silence stretched for a moment too long, then broke apart as Catherine shifted her weight, dragging in another breath before launching into her next performance. Her voice, louder now, vibrated with a desperate insistence that felt rehearsed, as though she had played this role before. "This is discrimination," she declared, loud enough for the nearby Rose to hear. "I told you I have anxiety. I need the window seat to feel safe. And this man," she pointed again, her finger trembling not with weakness, but with rage, "he's refusing to accommodate me. He's being cruel." The accusation lingered like smoke. People in the surrounding rows stirred, uncomfortable with the escalation. The man at the window did not move. His hand rested on his knee, steady, his jaw set with quiet resolve. He could feel the weight of the passengers, eyes shifting between them, a silent jury unsure of where their sympathies should land. The flight attendant spoke again, this time firmer, less patient. "Ma'am, your seat is the aisle in the row ahead. This passenger has the window here. You'll need to sit down so we can finish boarding." Catherine shook her head violently, her earrings swinging. No, you don't understand. I can't sit in the aisle. I'll have a panic attack. I've told you I can't. Why won't anyone listen?" Her voice cracked on the last word, feigning vulnerability, but her eyes were sharp and unyielding. Passengers began whispering more openly now. A man across the aisle muttered something under his breath. A young woman lifted her phone higher, openly recording. The man by the window caught the subtle glow of multiple screens pointed in their direction. The cameras were multiplying, angles stacking against her. He leaned forward slightly, speaking just loud enough for her to hear, though he knew the microphones on those phones would catch every syllable. If you can't sit in your assigned seat, maybe you shouldn't be flying. Her gasp echoed louder than it should have, a practice sound that carried down the cabin. She spun toward the rows behind her, searching for validation. Did you hear that? He just told me I shouldn't fly. This is harassment. Pure harassment. A ripple of disapproval moved through the passengers, but not toward him. The subtle shaking of heads, the smirks forming at the edges of lips, the rolling of eyes, all of it fell squarely on her. Still, she pressed on, refusing to surrender. The man by the window stayed still, his calmness in sharp contrast to her storm. Inside, his thoughts sharpened. He had already recognized the pattern. People like Catherine thrived on chaos. She fed on resistance, twisting it into proof of her imagined victimhood. Fighting back directly would only fuel her performance. No, if she wanted a stage, he would let her have it. He would let her script her own downfall. Catherine turned back to the flight attendant. Her voice dropped to a pleading tone, dripping with false fragility. Please understand. I can't do this. If I don't have that seat, I'll lose control. My anxiety is serious. You wouldn't want me to start screaming mid-flight, would you? The attendant's patience thinned. Her words clipped. Ma'am, if you're unable to sit in your assigned seat, we may need to remove you from this flight. That single sentence hit like turbulence, jolting the cabin. Gasps and murmurs spread. Catherine stiffened, her eyes wide, her mouth opening and closing without sound. For a heartbeat, she looked caught, cornered. Then her lips curled into a sneer. You wouldn't dare. I paid good money for this flight. I have rights. And I won't be treated this way by some power-tripping stranger who thinks his comfort is more important than my health. She pointed again at the man, her finger shaking with fury. He's the problem. He's heartless. The man finally moved. He shifted in his seat, turned just enough to meet her stare, and spoke with the weight of someone who had no fear of her theatrics. You're the one standing in the aisle, holding up the plane. I'm just sitting in the seat I paid for. Everyone here knows it. A murmur of agreement followed, faint but noticeable. Someone clapped once, then stopped, embarrassed by the attention. But the sound broke the spell. Catherine's authority was slipping, her control cracking under the strain. Her voice rose, climbing in pitch until it edged on shrill. Fine, record me. Post it online. I don't care. People will see the truth. They'll see how I was bullied for needing something simple. She was daring the cameras now, blind to the irony that they were already capturing her unraveling. The man in the hoodie let her rant, his silence more cutting than any retort. Each word she spat only tightened the noose she had tied for herself. The passengers leaned back in their seats, some hiding smiles, others whispering, waiting for the inevitable collapse. The longer she spoke, the less convincing she became. Finally, the flight attendant's voice cut through again, sharper than before. Ma'am, this is the last warning. Take your assigned seat or you will be escorted off this aircraft. The threat was real. Even Catherine felt it. Her shoulders sagged, her bravado faltering. But retreating would mean admitting defeat, and her pride wouldn't allow it. She glanced once more at the man, her eyes narrowed to slits, promising vengeance. Slowly, with exaggerated reluctance, she moved down the aisle and dropped into her assigned seat one row ahead. The motion was clumsy, loud, her bag thumping against the armrest as if to announce her displeasure. She muttered under her breath, words too low to catch but dripping with venom. The man by the window exhaled quietly, though his gaze never softened. He knew better than to think it was over. She wasn't the kind of person to surrender without planning another strike. Her pride was too inflated, her entitlement too deeply rooted. She would try again in some other form, and he needed to be ready. As boarding continued, the cabin's noise returned, though it carried an edge now, a nervous energy that hummed beneath the chatter. Phones remained angled toward the aisle, waiting, anticipating. The passengers weren't just travelers anymore. They were an audience, hungry for the next act. Catherine sat stiffly in her seat, her face turned toward the aisle, but every so often she peeked back at him, her eyes flashing with restrained fury. She was plotting. He could see it in the way her jaw clenched, in the rhythm of her restless fingers tapping against the armrest. She wasn't finished. He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Let her plan, he thought. Let her build her case, spin her lies, gather her courage. Every word, every outburst, every manipulative plea, it was all being recorded. The internet was already sharpening its claws. The engines rumbled faintly, a reminder that the flight hadn't yet begun. The real turbulence wasn't outside the plane. It was seated just a row ahead, simmering, waiting for another chance to ignite. And when she did, he would be ready. The door finally closed, the hiss of the pressurized cabin sealing everyone in. The engines growled beneath the floor, a low vibration that promised movement. Yet the atmosphere inside was still strained. Conversations had not returned to normal. People were waiting, not for takeoff, but for the next eruption. Catherine sat one row ahead, rigid, her yellow dress catching a light every time she shifted. Her hands clenched the armrests, her knuckles pale against the fabric. She kept turning her head slightly, just enough to glance back at him, her glare sharp with unspoken promises. She wasn't finished. Her pride couldn't survive silence. When the plane began to taxi, the tension broke. She unbuckled her belt halfway down the aisle and stood up again, ignoring the fastened seatbelt sign. A flight attendant rushed over, but Catherine raised her voice before the woman could speak. This is ridiculous. I can't sit there. I told you I can't breathe in the aisle. My anxiety is through the roof. And now she jabbed her finger backward toward the man at the window, her voice booming. He thinks it's funny to torment me. He's been smirking at me the whole time. Every phone came up again. Screens glowed in unison, capturing her meltdown from every angle. Passengers who hadn't filmed before joined in now, emboldened by the chaos. The cabin had transformed into a stage, and she was the unwilling performer caught in the spotlight. The man at the window didn't rise. He sat still, arms folded, his face unreadable. His restraint only amplified her hysteria. The flight attendant's tone carried no patience this time. Ma'am, sit down immediately or the captain will have you removed from this aircraft. Catherine froze, her chest heaving, her glare darting between the attendant and the phones pointed at her. For a moment she seemed to weigh her options. Then her voice rose to a shriek. Remove me? For what? For being scared? For asking for a little compassion? You people are heartless. The man finally spoke, his words calm but loud enough to reach her and the cameras. No one's heartless. We just want to take off. You're the only one stopping that from happening. His voice carried the authority of reason, and the murmurs around the cabin confirmed it. Someone muttered, "Just sit down already." Another voice chimed, "We all paid for seats too." Her face twisted, fury colliding with humiliation. She wanted allies, but none came. The passengers' patience had expired. They were no longer silent observers. They were against her. The attendant gestured firmly. "Sit down now." Catherine dropped into her seat with a forceful thud, her face flushed, her breathing ragged. She buckled herself in, jerking the belt with unnecessary aggression. Her lips moved soundlessly, muttering curses that no one cared to decipher. The engines roared, the plane lifting from the ground, but the real turbulence was already in motion. Phones buzzed in pockets and purses as clips began to upload midair. Airplane Wi-Fi carried her tantrum into the world beyond the cabin. The man leaned his head back, closing his eyes, letting the vibration of assent wash over him. He didn't need to do anything else. She had written her own story, and it was being broadcast in real time. 2 hours into the flight, whispers spread among the passengers. Screens glowed with the same video. Her face, contorted with rage, her finger jabbing the air. The captions varied. Window seat Karen, entitled passenger freakout, anxiety or arrogance. The numbers under each clip climbed rapidly. Thousands of views turned into tens of thousands, then more. Catherine noticed. She craned her neck toward a teenager across the aisle who was scrolling through the very video she starred in. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Delete that. I'll sue you if you don't." The teenager raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. He angled his screen so his friend beside him could see, and both laughed quietly. Catherine's face burned. She turned back, sinking low in her seat, but she couldn't escape the glowing screens. The cabin itself had become a mirror, reflecting her own downfall from every angle. The man at the window finally allowed himself a small smile. Not gloating, not cruel, just the satisfaction of knowing she had destroyed herself without him lifting a finger. By the time the plane began its descent, the videos had reached hundreds of thousands of views. Comment sections flooded with ridicule. Memes appeared, her image pasted onto cartoon airplanes, captions mocking her demands. She had become a symbol of entitlement, her name forgotten, but her face unforgettable. The landing was rougher for her than for anyone else. She kept her head down as the wheels screeched against the runway, her body shrinking into the seat as if she could vanish. But vanishing wasn't possible. The internet had already carved her into permanence. When the plane taxied to the gate and the seatbelt sign blinked off, the passengers stood quickly, eager to escape the cabin. They avoided her, creating a buffer in the aisle. No one wanted to be near her, not even accidentally. The man at the window rose calmly, slipping his bag from the overhead bin. He moved with unhurried precision, as though nothing had happened. But as he stepped into the aisle, he caught her glare. It was sharp, venomous, but hollow. The fight had drained from her. He leaned slightly, just enough so only she could hear. Sometimes the best seat isn't the window. It's knowing when to stay quiet. Her eyes widened, but she had no words left. Silence was the only weapon remaining, and even that failed her. He walked off the plane, the air outside cooler, freer. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it once he reached the terminal, the notifications stacking in endless lines. Messages from friends, tags from strangers, links to the viral clips. The internet had already judged her, and the verdict was unanimous. Hours later, while he sat in a cafe waiting for his connection, he saw the headline on a news site: "Airline passenger causes scene over window seat. Removed from future flights, pending review." The article was brief, but the implication was clear. Her tantrum hadn't just cost her dignity. It had cost her freedom to fly. He sipped his coffee slowly, savoring the warmth. Justice, he thought, didn't always need a gavel. Sometimes it came with the quiet tap of a record button, the collective voice of strangers, and the weight of one's own arrogance. Catherine's story was no longer hers to control. It belonged to the internet now, carved into the endless archive of viral humiliation. And unlike the flight they had shared, there was no safe landing for her reputation.